there has been an ongoing meta shift in competitive TF2 that isn't like necessarily reaching a boiling point or a head, but is and in some sense nearing its apotheosis, I suppose. And that is of the Loch-n-Load. Now, to be very clear on my biases and where I stand on things, I use the Loch-n-Load full time and have for a very long time, actually. I was one of the early adopters and actually one of the early, I should say, I guess, advocates for it very early on. And it has since become a very common staple that a lot of demos use and a lot of players talk about, because in some respects it can be quite disruptive. So I am generally biased towards the weapon as someone who uses it, as someone who's been using it for a very long time. That being said, generally I honestly underuse the weapon. I definitely lean more on stickies than a lot of other demos do. So I'm not one of the major abusers of the weapon despite using it full time. So I wouldn't be particularly upset whether it's in the metagame or not, despite the fact that I do use it. So with that in mind, let us talk about what the Loch-n-Load does, how it took the metagame by storm, and yeah, where people stand on it. So for starters, I have already talked about the lock in my Demo Man unlock video, where I kind of give a brief description and talk about every unlock that demo has. And I do say the lock is quite good. I don't remember my exact wording, but I do recall saying that it can be a powerful option, but you have to be prudent with it to avoid its downsides, which I think is very true. So it really does mostly come down to the projectile speed. That is the primary reason that anyone uses it. The building damage, to be clear, is really nice, and being able to sticky pipe any sentry gun is really useful to have when pushing last, because you can just take out guns even faster, and as a result your Uber gets to last. Your Uber gets to take more space, I suppose. It gets to cross more often, and you're more likely to win if you take out the gun faster, so that's always nice. But the big thing is the projectile speed, because that makes not only pipes easier to hit, but also really increases your range for hitting those pipes, which is a big deal. So on the second channel recently, I talked about using stickies versus pipes when you want to be using one over the other. So check that out if you're interested in the context here, I suppose. But one of the things I kind of offhandedly mentioned there is that pipes deal a lot of damage, and they can deal kind of fight-winning amounts of damage sort of across the map. So I think in many respects, the disruptiveness of the Loch-n-Load is a symptom of the disruptiveness of pipes, in just that being able to deal 100 damage across the map is a really big deal. And for pretty much anyone, if you pipe a scout, that scout almost just, well, if you pipe anyone, they kind of can't play the game for a little bit until they get arrowed or rehealed. Piping a scout brings them down to, you know, 1 rocket territory from pretty much any percent, even like a full buff. Piping a soldier kind of ruins their entire plan on a team fight, because they would have really liked that 100 health to be bombing with and have a nice cushion to take some damage on their bomb while still living. Piping a demo is a big deal. A full buff demo, it's not such a massive problem, but it just makes them way squishier. And if that demo is not full buff, they need to, you know, not be participating in the fight so as to get rehealed and be healthy. And then of course piping a med, it's not uncommon for a med to take 50 damage in spam. I mean, that's literally just like 2 spam rockets, a random sticky and a rocket, and maybe even if a scout has some pretty accurate pistol shots, that can rack up to, you know, good 30 damage. Combine that with a rocket sticky, whatever, that's 50 damage. So a pipe immediately puts your medic in range of just dying to random spam. But also, you know, players can communicate. So if a medic is piped, then the other team's soldiers are going to know about that, and they can bomb and just get the freest kill ever, because it's extremely easy for a soldier to be able to bomb in and deal at least 50 damage to a medic, right? So it is a big deal when you hit a pipe, and being able to do that from way further away is a big deal, and that's a really potent tool to have. So I think in many respects, yeah, the power of the lock is the fact that you're taking the power of a pipe and, you know, applying it in ways that people haven't really seen before. They aren't used to being piped across an entire map. Now, to be clear, these are projectiles. You can see them coming and dodge, but you're not always, it's not that simple a lot of the time. And, you know, sometimes you're distracted. Sometimes you're just getting bombed by a soldier and you have to look away, and their demo can just kind of, you know, shoot footballs at you and get lucky and get a drop or something, or a kill. That does happen. But yeah, the range is a huge deal, and the projectile speed is what causes that. So that's basically the primary asset that the lock has. The fact that you can deal effective spam damage, really effective spam damage, like a lot of damage when you hit your shots from way further away. And Demo is already a class that prefers to play defensively. At least you're generally better off playing defensively. You really never want to die as a Demo if you can help it. And being able to be more passive while still hitting pipes is a huge deal. And that's something that a lot of demos would appreciate. So anyway, that's the major plus, the major upside of the weapon. Now, there are downsides, to be clear. The primary one, in my opinion, is not the decreased size of the clip, having only 3 pipes instead of 4, which is a downside, and you would much rather have 4 than 3. I think the big downside is the no rollers, because rollers are just so good. Being able to just spam a choke point, I mean, pipe spam is really effective when you're just spamming choke points, but being able to just spam a choke point and have close to guaranteed damage, because if the team just commits to getting through, they're going to be eating that roller chip. Just being able to secure extra damage here and there is a big deal when teams are trying to advance through a point, because your job as a demo is to get damage on players as they're walking through doors so that they can't walk through doors. And having rollers makes a big difference there. So with things like that, and also just team fights in general that are kind of scrappy, having the rollers, having the extra pipe is a big deal. And you do kind of feel that when you're using those weapons, or rather when you're using stock, you feel kind of the absence of them, because it's very easy to just do 0 damage spamming the lock, because there's just no rollers and the pipes just, you know, crumble when they hit the ground. And if your enemies dodge it, which again, I want to reiterate, you can dodge these things, they're not just, you know, lock on automatic. If you dodge it, the demo does effectively nothing. So yeah, those are the major upsides and downsides, and kind of where things stand. So as far as where the lock stands in the metagame, it has very much taken over and is a very common option to see nowadays. And a lot of the complaints center around it being kind of just a free to spam weapon that has way too much reward for the risk being taken. Because you can, of course, spam pretty far back. Well, I suppose let's just talk about how the different classes interact with the lock and how things might be different. So let's start out with Scout. So Scouts, of course, want to be standing on high ground. They want to be killing demos if they can get cleanly in on them. And the lock does switch things up a little bit. So for starters, a lot of your positions as a scout are going to be much more vulnerable against the lock-and-load than they might be against regular pipes. One such example could be here on process, where it's not uncommon, or I should just say, scouts tend to stand on the rock at mid, as my scout is actually right now, early into a mid fight, right? Or just in general. They like to be up there because it's a good spot to spot soldiers, a good spot to deny soldier bombs, things like that. Now, on a mid fight as a demo, you can shoot a lock there from complete safety where you'd want to be standing anyway. And if that scout is not paying attention, their entire mid is now ruined. And you get to do that, from a position that you wouldn't otherwise, just because, you're using that weapon. And for a scout that just gets piped, standing in the spot that they are told and learned is like safe to stand on, and now they just don't get to really take the fight and could die to spam or just need to get rehealed and all that. That feels bad, right? Now, of course, there is counterplay. You can be like looking at the spam coming in, but still, that changes a lot. And as far as your 1v1 capacity with a demo goes, I want to be clear, still scout heavily favored in a 1v1 against a demo, but the faster pipes do make it easier to hit a scout in medium range, which can help turn the tide in some fights. And again, that's going to feel bad for the scout. Now, getting onto soldier, similar thing to scout, where a lot of the time you're trying to play high ground positions, and just catching a lock pipe will ruin your entire plan. And I think the lock does actually really excel at shooting soldiers. You can kind of tell where soldiers are trying to land sometimes, and you can just meet them with a pipe. And also a soldier, while in my opinion the most mobile class overall with access to rocket jumps, if you're not jumping, then you're one of the slowest and the easiest to hit. So a soldier on high ground, if they don't want to immediately jump off, they might just be catching a pipe that otherwise a demo from a safe position wouldn't be able to connect because it would be too far away. So things like that can be really disruptive because people are just used to playing certain positions and playing in a certain way based on the other team's demo only being able to hit that, super punchy 100 damage pipe on certain much closer positions. And being able to expand that range suddenly turns a lot of would-be safe places to stand and would-be safe ways to play into dangerous places where you still have to actively pay attention to the spam coming in, otherwise you could just die. So yeah, it can be very disruptive in a sense in that way. Next, as far as demo goes, personally, I don't even really notice when another demo is using the lock. Sometimes there's like a pipe or two that hits. It's like, oh, I probably would have dodged that if it was stock. But, and a lot of the reason why I personally don't see how broken the gun is because as a demo, I hardly ever know. Like, I find it very easy to dodge lock pipes. I try to pay very close attention to the spam coming in, pretty much whenever. And I don't often get punished very hard just because the other demos using the lock and load, right? The interactions aren't really that different. I guess if you're just catching lock and load pipes on a mid fight, then yeah, that might be a big deal. But I'm inclined to say in demo v demo interactions, if a demo is getting rolled by the lock, then they would be getting rolled by pretty much anything, because that's largely a matter of just not paying attention to the spam coming in. Anyway, the big one though is of course the medic interaction, because as a medic, getting piped just ruins everything. When you get piped as a medic, you pretty much just want to get a pack, or you might just want to use your Uber so as not to die, because you are that frail and vulnerable suddenly. So, of course, when you get piped from ranges you're not really used to, then that sucks for you a lot, and it sucks for your team as well. So it's really not uncommon for just a lock and load demo to get just a complete drop on a medic. In cases that, of course, they're, shooting at the correct place and reading, where the enemy wants to position themselves and stuff like that. Like, they're not just AFK pressing buttons. They're still thinking. But the pipe connecting does feel kind of random, and a lot of the time it happens when a medic is distracted or something, and as a result, it just feels really, really bad. And, like, the player that is on the receiving end of that is not going to want to play with that weapon. So that's kind of where a lot of the grievance comes from, is people are not used to the weapon. And as a result, they're playing in a certain way and playing in certain positions and doing certain things that make a lot of sense for the metagame everyone is used to, where demos have a certain range that they can play at and be effective at. And this kind of breaks that barrier to some degree. So you can catch people not used to that and punish them for it. Now, that being said, I do think there is a large element of confirmation bias when it comes to things like this, because I have seen people complain about the lock-and-load in a specific instance after getting piped or something, when it literally has like nothing to do with the weapon itself and they just caught, right? So, I mean, people have been playing this game for decades, and people have been getting piped by demos for decades. It's always happened, and it will continue to happen. But on some level, when you get piped from a lock-and-load, you think like, wait, I just got piped there, like, damn, I hate this weapon, right? And I think that happens with a lot of different situations, where if the demo were using the Iron Bomber, like right there, I get piped just around a blind corner from the Iron Bomber, right? Again, some people, if that was a lock-and-load pipe, they might be thinking like, wow, like this stupid weapon, they're just getting carried by it, right? So I do think there is some confirmation bias to the discussion. People just notice more when they're getting piped by the lock-and-load. That is a perfect example, actually, of just the lock-and-load sync bow being just completely winning this fight single-handedly. So yeah, there's definitely some confirmation bias where the gun actually didn't really make much of a difference. The person still just would have eaten the same damage, but it just feels way worse because you notice it with that particular weapon. Now, that being said, it is, of course, still very disruptive, and again, expands the demo's range. There are actual tangible benefits to this weapon that draw people to using it. So it's not completely unfounded. It's not just strict cope. There just happens to be a lot of cope, right? Like, for instance, earlier on that mid, that medic just catching a lock-and-load and a bow at the exact same time. Is that a range that the Iron Bomber can reasonably reach? Kind of, but it's going to take so long to get there that it's really way less likely to be a threat. Is it impossible for that medic to react to and dodge that pipe in time? No, he absolutely could have, and just didn't, right? And so you have to kind of gauge whether it's a matter of, is the counterplay fair to do, and is the counterplay like reasonable? Where there's of course gonna be a lot of stupid pipes that lock-and-load demos hit. Is it unreasonable to expect people to just dodge it, right? And I don't know necessarily where I stand on that. I think that's largely a matter of opinion. Lock-and-load has been banned in Europe for quite some time now, actually. It is not currently banned in North America. I don't think a ban is particularly popular at the moment, at least among the entire player base, but a lot of people do really hate this thing, and it has really taken over the metagame. So I just thought I'd kind of describe, you know, how this gun is different from, you know, say just using stock versus Iron Bomber, where the counterplay against the two is virtually the exact same. This does really shake things up and can be pretty disruptive at its best. Now, of course, it's not, in my opinion, a strict upgrade. I think Iron Bomber is still very good. But yeah, I can understand where people are coming from when they don't want to play with this thing. Man, do I just think people should get better? Because honestly, a lot of the time I see people complain about, at least when I'm using it. And to be clear, I'm not like a hardline abuser of the thing. I don't use it that extreme. I don't use it to the same extremes that a lot of other players do. But a lot of the time I hear people complaining about it. It's often just like you're standing in a spot that you should be paying attention, but you're not. Or like you saw that coming, you could have reacted and you just didn't. So I just kind of feel like I'm outplaying you, not that I'm just using a gun that does everything for me. But yeah, it is a matter of opinion. I understand where people are coming from. And yeah, I just thought I would explain, you know, where the Loch-n-Load stands, why it is as popular now as it is, and who knows what the future will bring. Anyway, hope that was interesting for you guys, and catch you next time. Oh, that's the wrong thing. Okay, goodbye.